All right, I'm a little bit late here considering the launch of the game, the controversy, and the outpouring of opinions over the past weekend or so, but having finally sat down and played a substantial portion of Dragonage Veilguard, I thought it was time to weigh in, give my thoughts, my opinions, and explain why this is very much not a good game for an abundance of reasons well and truly beyond the political discourse, and I am quite frankly baffled completely by the level of praise that I've been seeing when the impressions I have personally are overwhelmingly negative. First things first, because I think it's important to clarify this right off the bat here. The game isn't bad because it's woke. That's a Trojan horse line of criticism, in my view. You can do it, but it kind of torpedoes the efficacy of much more important issues, of which there are many. It's not bad because of a certain quest line that makes you trans. It's not bad because of the cringe dialogue section about how your companion is non-binary. It's not bad because they decided to put pronouns in the character creator or have top scars and vitiligo as creation options. It's bad because it's actually bad design, and it's a complete betrayal of the Dragon Age franchise for anyone who used to be fans of the world building, atmosphere, and raw gameplay. However, just to put all of my cards on the table before really kicking it off, all of those things are extremely obnoxious. It feels like this game was made by and for Twitter activists, unironically. And while that seems to be a very heavily focused on aspect for the game's most vocal critics, what I care about is raw gameplay. It's a video game, not a movie or a book, and the primary determining factor behind what is or is not a good video game, at least to me, in my view, is how fun it is to play, not how annoyed I get with the perceived politics. With that said, I'll break everything down into three categories. Story, which includes dialogue, quests, narrative, etc. Combat, which is pretty self-explanatory. And general design, which is things like layout, visuals, loot drops, etc. Between those three categories, I think it'll become clear why I think the game is subpar. And one final side note before I get going, I have not finished the game's main storyline yet. I do not plan to continue playing it, and I think that calling this a full-on review is probably unfair as a result of that, so this is my impressions of Veilguard, and a descriptive explanation of why I think the game is not worth my time to play. Here goes. Let's start with story. Veilguard has a pretty rudimentary storyline where you have to defeat two elven gods, which I have not done, but right from the start it pivots away from the expected main villain, that villain being Solus, who's trying to take down the Veil, after you pretty much defeat him immediately, and move on to assembling a party and doing various missions. This is where my experience rapidly began falling apart, because after the first 20 to 40 minutes of the game, you start actually experiencing what it has to offer, and what the game has to offer is garbage. During my very first gameplay session, I caught myself laughing, not because of genuine humor, but because of the absurdity, when one of my party members yelled out, "It's quiet. Too quiet." Sure, you can argue that it's a fun little cliche line, but something felt really off about the delivery of that line, and I couldn't help but feel in the back of my mind that this kind of surface-level depth was about to become extremely common. Spoiler alert, I was right. It does. A few minutes later, one of my companions says to the other one, "Wait, so you're really Nev Gallus?" Continuing on with some flattery-driven exposition dump. But these two companions had already met each other a long time ago. We were traveling together for a decent amount of time, and the fact that one character, who very obviously already knows that the other character is Nev Gallus, was saying this random line at some random point in time, and it made absolutely no sense, once again making me laugh for all the wrong reasons. After that, I heard a party member say, quote, "This blight is weird," and I pretty much lost it again until an even better moment where I ran up against a massively overleveled boss enemy, died immediately in seconds because I didn't even have my hands on the keyboard at the time and I was typing a message on my phone, and I was faced with a companion saying some variation of, "Wow, we were so close that time." No, we weren't. How hard would it have been to code in some sort of if-then criteria trigger where your party members only talk about how close the fight was when you actually get close to killing the boss monster, or deal any damage to it whatsoever? Let's say 20% of its health bar left. And genuinely, sincerely, it all goes downhill from there. Eventually, I met the game's biggest joke of a character, the one who also just so happens to be the very vocally non-binary one, and ran up against a new type of enemy. Enemies are bland and extremely annoying because of how long they take to kill on higher difficulties, but I'll get to that part later on in the combat section. Yeah, encountering this new enemy type led to a sort of 1-2 punch type dialogue exchange, where this non-binary party member says, "Be ready for those new enemies. They go hard," which is modern day slang. It feels completely disjointed coming from a Kunari, and once again made me feel like the game was a joke. Right after that, okay, like It would have been okay, perhaps, if I had a little bit more time in between to like cleanse my metaphorical palate. Right after that, okay, she says, whatever, they say, eat shit, this isn't your land. In such an unexpectedly cringe way, I felt like a Twitter activist had literally hacked my game and started speaking into my headphones. That's the whole colonizers are evil trope, which is fine, whatever. But they go hard and eat shit? Yeah, this doesn't feel like a Dragon Age game. It feels like a Tumblr fan fiction writer got full control of a AAA narrative and just couldn't stop themselves from screwing it up with contemporary bullshit. It didn't take long for me to just stop caring totally about what party members were saying because the things that they say are idiotic. They sound like morons, they disrupt your experience with their random shouting, and the things that they say aren't funny or immersive. They're obnoxious. I stopped writing them down at this point because I realized that dialogue choices don't matter. Party members don't have independent perspectives and emotions. It's a mile wide and an inch deep, with an overabundance of things that make you physically cringe. As for quest design, it's about as linear as you can get, with a spattering of quests where some of them feel mildly interesting maybe, and others feel pointless. I wasn't excited to pick up a new one, and I wasn't excited when they got finished, because it didn't feel like I had actually achieved anything. They're all virtually the same anyway. I wasn't shaping the world or discovering new things. I was advancing through a monotonous chain of actions that I didn't care about, with people that annoyed me. And sure, you can say, well, that's a personal problem. I loved it. But I find it very hard to believe that anyone out there praising this game actually thinks that the depth of dialogue and character immersion is even remotely comparable to previous Dragon Age games. Because it's not. It's frankly insulting to anyone who enjoyed the franchise before this, and it's a completely new direction that is being praised by some writers as fantastic, despite looking and feeling like juvenile trash. Suffice it to say, I think the narrative, writing, dialogue, and even voice acting / character modeling in this game is very subpar. There were these really funny but depressing moments where certain characters would make demented-looking facial expressions, like the corners of their mouth are like all lurching around. It's terrible. Or they'd prance around jogging in a super unnatural way as you follow them. But the point of this entire section is to say that when playing Dragonage Veilguard, I was annoyed by what I experienced, not immersed. But wait, because that's only the beginning, and if we're talking about problems, which we are, combat is a veritable cornucopia of poor decision-making. Briefly summarizing before I get to specific details here, the combat has adopted a sort of Mass Effect Andromeda system of comboed abilities. Except Mass Effect Andromeda does it far better. During combat, you have 3 of your own abilities and then 2 companions who each get 3 more. It is extremely rudimentary and basically involves spam dodging all over the place using abilities off cooldown to whittle away at the enemy's health bars. Just to be perfectly plain, it is very much not a difficult game. It just takes forever to kill anything, on the harder difficulties at least, which is what I played on. You spend a disproportionate amount of time dodging around until you can actually deal some damage, and the frantic pacing is a very poor way to mask how shallow the combat really is, especially when you combine it with a skill tree that is completely uninteresting. The skill tree nodes feel empty, half of them do things that you really don't care about, nor would you ever care about if attempting to make any sort of specialized build, for instance, a high damage DPS class cannon. You just can't really do those types of things. And the overall depth, yet again, feels like a puddle. Big surface area, no depth. Incremental upgrades are like frosting on a cake, in my view. If the cake itself tastes good, that is, if the combat is fun to play, the frosting and the sprinkles are appreciated. But when the cake is just uncooked batter with no flavor, covering it with 5 types of different colored frosting, in this case the runes for your dagger and the level ups for your gear with enchantments and skill tree nodes, covering it with an overabundance of frosting does nothing to fix the underlying problem, which is boring one-dimensional combat. Look at this, okay? Look at this right here. This is the previous Dragon Age format. Clips from Inquisition, and even Origins as well. This kind of macro decision-making, combined with the capability of crafting your own tactical rule sets for different party members, allows you to feel a level of battlefield control that is very much appreciated and fun. Characters do different things. They feel like they have unique value. Dragon Age Veilguard has basically none of that. Instead favoring a very boring, sad, frantic yet predictable combat framework that legitimately feels closer to a mobile game than a real Dragon Age product. Try this on for size. Healing has been condensed down to a very simple 3-potion system. You either get healed by a party member with an ability, use an ability of your own, or use one of your 3 potions. But the way that you get potion refills is by shooting green urns, bright green urns, scattered across the whole map. You don't craft them, you don't get them as drops. You run around the world where there's just hundreds of bright green urns, and whenever you want more potions, you go shoot one because there's probably one 15 feet away from you. It's like a mobile game. I have a genuine question here for anyone who likes this game and wants to give it an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Was there no better way to do this? There was nothing they could have done that was more creative than just bright green urns all over the place that drop a single potion when shot. I find it impossible to believe that this, after the depth of systems we had in previous Dragon Age products, is actually a good thing. Because it isn't a good thing. It's lazy and it's boring. Here's another comparison. The ballista in this game is an arcadey joke. You have a couple very early moments of using it, and I couldn't help but think every single time I used it. Think back to like Dragon's Dogma 2, where using a ballista felt like a battle-changing weapon, man. It felt impactful. It was a huge, powerful device where cranking off a shot actually meant something, had like really visceral feedback. But Dragon Age Veilguard has once again opted for a gimmicky, cheap-feeling mechanic that just spams out shots and makes me think of a phone game that you play on the toilet, or in the doctor's office before they call you in for the appointment. Nothing about this combat makes me feel invested, and everything about it makes me wish I was playing any other one of about 15 similar products that just do every single aspect of it better. Now for the final nail in the coffin, which is general design. See, Dragon Age Veilguard isn't just predictable with its combat, it's predictable with its level design. Why they chose this, I'll probably never understand, but most of the doors that you encounter during the extremely linear levels that you play are blocked by something. At first it's fine, okay, you shoot the debris, walk through the door, cool. But after a while you notice the repetition. Shoot the debris, go through. Shoot the wall, it breaks, go through. And then shoot the blight pod, it blows up, walk through the hole. Eventually, though, they decided, why just make them shoot the door once to get through it? Why not add more steps? After which you start having to shoot the surrounding blight pods that are connected back to the main one, and then you can shoot the main one to go through the door. Or how about a reskin? Now you shoot the red crystal and go through the door. Now you shoot the crystals in a chain and go through the door. And on and on and on. It's so stupid. Why do you need to have so many doors blocked by such rudimentary puzzle mechanics? Why do you need to spend our time shooting these stupid little gimmicks one after another, just to walk through a door to a new area again and again, where you'll once again fight 6 of the same enemies who have way too much health and require 0 tactical effort? Why punctuate the already boring combat design with boring level design? And why in the world are people praising this game? Check this out. There is a jump button, default coded to F in my case for some reason, but you can play like 99% of the game without ever jumping, despite the fact that they have literal jump puzzles. You'll do a thing and your party member will like spawn a mystical platform so you can get to the other side of the ravine, but you can just run straight at the damn thing off the edge roughly 100% of the time and then climb up the other side. Why put in jump puzzles when the edges are so close together, you can just accidentally fall off yet still climb up like nothing happened? It's like taking a test that's multiple choice, but they made all 4 answers the same thing. Yeah, it's multiple choice and you have to fill one in, but it straight up doesn't matter which one because they're all the same. You essentially can't fail, so why take the test? Why have the jump puzzle when, like, I just don't understand. Connecting back to the combat, loot is just super underwhelming, but the design aspect of it is that you never have to go more than like 10 steps off the beaten path to find all of it. It's always right around the corner, or barely hidden behind a bush, or even puzzles like rotating statues, but you can just run around randomly pressing the levers for a few seconds, and ta-da, you solved the puzzle. Here's your reward, more loot that doesn't matter. The days of finding a special area way off the beaten trail and fighting a difficult enemy that you have to like min-max your kit to even attempt the battle, and then finding gear that actually matters after you win, gear which genuinely makes you stronger, are gone in this franchise. Because the stuff you find is mostly useless, you find it with 0 effort, and it's located immediately to your left or right or below you or whatever, in a shocking display of let's dumb the content down to the lowest common denominator and ruin a franchise. Why did they break so far from something that was, despite its many flaws, so appreciated and fun? Why would they redefine the franchise into this really juvenile display of arcadey on-rails storytelling when the previous Dragon Age games were the antithesis of that? What was the purpose of going down the contemporary social politics route and making sure that they stuck modern-day social media discourse, and slang as well, into a long-standing franchise that comparably none of that existed in previous entries? And why on earth is this game being praised by so many media figures when it's objectively bad for the majority of one's playtime? Bioware has produced games that have humor before, obviously, don't get me wrong, but there's something different and something so obviously forced with this game, to a point where a character is yelling, no joke, "Eat shit, this isn't your land," right after "they go hard." And someone wrote that, then approved it, then voice acted it, and not one person with decision-making power in the entire corporate chain stepped back and realized, wait, this is stupid. Maybe we shouldn't make a game like this. I understand the argument that the game removes some of the more menial tasks that Inquisition perhaps kind of suffered from. I understand that having on-rails linear storytelling is not intrinsically worse than an open-world experience, especially if that open-world experience is sparsely populated and boring. But Dragonage Veilguard is such a dull, uninteresting experience, I'm not even going to finish it. And believe me, the Dragonage franchise overall is something that holds a very dear place in my heart, so when I say this, I'm not grinning or happy. I'm saying something that I'm sad about. The fact that this game has practically nothing that I used to enjoy is actually very sad for me, and it's a completely new direction that, in my opinion, makes no sense. Bottom line here, I have enjoyed basically nothing about this game, to an extent where it's not even worth finishing. You can criticize it for the woke aspects, sure, but to me it's just lost. It's an attempt at forging a new path for the Dragonage franchise that alienates people like me, prior fans, while also reducing what was previously a complex storytelling, narrative, and combat experience down to a pale shadow of its former self. It feels like it shouldn't even be in the same category. Some people like it, which is fine, I guess, but in my opinion, this is a 4 out of 10 at best, and really seems to have missed the mark in every single fundamental category. There's actually no better way to describe it. This is a game for the lowest of the low common denominator. I do not recommend this game, I will not be finishing it, and I hope that Bioware goes back to some semblance of what used to make their games good, hopefully. Because despite the level of commercial success that this has achieved, and it is commercially successful, that's just a fact, don't let people tell you it's not, I view it to be a disappointing display of reductive storytelling / combat design that is completely unenjoyable and bland. I was not challenged, I was not engaged, and I was thoroughly unimpressed. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. Locals and Patreon for monthly memberships, a special VPN deal for the entire community, that's a good one, a new Upper Echelon website, which is linked down below as well, with articles that are now being posted, and more. There's a bunch of different things, you can check them out. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.